DNA just destroyed the story your Irish-American family told for generations.
The Spanish Armada story has been told in Irish families for 400 years. Scientists finally decided to test it. They analyzed thousands of Irish DNA samples across every county. They found 0 Spanish markers, not one. But the real shock is not that the story was wrong. The real shock is what they found instead. A Bronze Age migration, 4,500 years ago, replaced an entire island's population and left a genetic signature that is still showing up in DNA tests across Appalachian America today. If your family came from Ireland or from Appalachia, this video explains something your family has been getting wrong for 200 years. This is not a story about a shipwreck. It is a story about a migration so complete it rewrote the genetics of an entire island, and the face it left behind is still visible in your family today. It does not start in 1588. It starts 4,500 years before the Spanish fleet ever set sail. And once you see what the DNA actually shows, the story your family told will never sound the same again. Let's start with the story that every Irish American is told. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain launched the most powerful naval fleet ever assembled. 130 ships, 30,000 men. They were headed straight for England. The English Navy hunted them north. The only route home was around Scotland and down the Irish Atlantic coast. That is where the storms were waiting. 20,000 men sank to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. The ones who washed up alive on the Irish coast numbered in the hundreds. Survivors washed onto the Irish Atlantic coast, dark-haired, olive-skinned, visibly different from the pale, freckled locals who found them. They married into the population, the story goes. Their blood explains the dark faces in the west of Ireland today. Geneticists ran the numbers. A few dozen sailors, scattered across hundreds of miles of coastline, cannot move the genetic needle on a nation of millions. The math was never close, and when researchers tested the actual DNA, the Spanish signal was not there. The Viking theory carries more evidence, but it has the same problem. Norse raiders hit Ireland hard between the 9th century and the 11th century. They founded Dublin. They settled the eastern port towns. They left a real genetic trace. Genetic surveys confirm a measurable Scandinavian signal in Irish DNA. That part is true, but that signal sits in the east of Ireland, in the cities the Vikings built. Dublin, Wexford, Waterford. Not in Kerry, not in Cork, not in Galway. The Black Irish look is concentrated in the west, where the Vikings barely went. The Norman conquest of the 12th century leaves an even thinner mark, aristocratic, eastern, confined to a handful of noble surnames near the English Pale. Every theory the Irish passed down pointed at a stranger from outside, and every one of those theories was facing the wrong direction. Not one of them can explain the face in your family photo, because the real answer has nothing to do with a visitor, nothing to do with a raid or a fleet or a foreign king. It requires going somewhere none of those stories could ever follow. Back to Ireland, 2500 BC. Whatever you think your Irish ancestry means, it does not start with the Celts. It does not start with St. Patrick. It starts here. Picture Ireland 4,500 years ago. Stone circles on hilltops, aligned with the rising sun at solstice, gathering places for the living. Passage tombs older than the Egyptian pyramids. On the shortest day of winter, a single beam of sunlight entered the chamber and fell on the bones of the dead. Neolithic farmers, working land their Mediterranean ancestors had settled 1,000 years before. A population with deep genetic roots in the Irish soil. People who looked different from what you expect when you think of Ireland. Darker skin, shorter, more lightly built. Archaeologists could tell them apart from later arrivals just by looking at their bones, before DNA testing even existed. A world about to be completely erased. Around 2500 BC, the Bell Beaker people arrived. Generation after generation, they had pushed westward from the grasslands of what is now Ukraine and Russia, through the heart of Europe, across Britain, and over the Irish Sea. They brought advanced bronze metalwork, distinctive pottery styles, and something far more significant than either, new DNA. What happened next was not cultural exchange. It was not assimilation over slow centuries. Archaeologists and geneticists now agree on the word for what it actually was: replacement. DNA studies show that up to 90% of the existing population in Britain and Ireland was replaced within just a few generations. Think about what that means. The people who built Newgrange, who aligned stone circles with the winter solstice, who buried their dead in those passage tombs. They did not disappear slowly over centuries. They were gone within the span of a few lifetimes. Whatever drove it, the result was total. The Ireland that existed before the Beaker arrival effectively ceased to exist, but not completely. A small fraction survived, absorbed into the new population, invisible in every history book ever written. The Irish are known for one thing above everything else: they endure. They lose almost everything and find a way to hold on to what remains. That reputation did not start with the famine. It did not start with Cromwell. It did not start with centuries of occupation. It started here, 4,500 years ago, when a small fraction of a people refused to vanish completely. In the DNA, that surviving fraction left something behind: the pigmentation genes that kept dark hair alive as the population around them turned lighter, the face that nobody could explain for 400 years, the face that might be in your family right now. And the Ireland that came after is where your story actually begins. We are about to go into the actual bones, the actual DNA, the specific evidence that connects ancient Ireland to modern America. If you are not subscribed, do it now, because this is the history of the American people that nobody else is telling, and we can only keep making it with your support. The proof is in the ground itself. On Rathlin Island, off the north coast of Ireland, researchers excavated Bronze Age men buried between 2,500 and 2000 BC. When those ancient bones were sequenced in a modern laboratory, they carried the R1b-L21 haplogroup. R1b-L21 is a genetic marker passed unchanged from father to son across thousands of years. That same marker is found in over 65% of Irish men alive today, and in millions of Irish American men who never knew they were carrying it. Those were not ancient strangers from a forgotten world. They were direct ancestors. If you have Irish roots, those men buried on Rathlin Island were not someone else's history. They were yours. 4,000 years of unbroken lineage, confirmed in a laboratory. The Beaker people also carried the gene for lactose persistence, the ability to digest milk into adulthood. In a land where dairy became a foundation of the diet, that gene spread until Ireland now holds the highest frequency of it anywhere on Earth. They brought variants for lighter skin and lighter eyes. Those traits spread quickly across the island, but the genes for dark hair did not disappear. In certain communities along the Atlantic coast, in certain tight-knit lineages, the ancient dark pigmentation alleles did something more than survive. They flourished. That is where the Black Irish story actually begins. Not on a wrecked galleon, not on a Viking longboat, in the bones of people who were Irish before Ireland had a name. But here is what makes it more complicated and more fascinating. The Bronze Age transformation reshaped Ireland mostly through its fathers. The Y chromosome tells that story clearly, but there is a second genetic record, the one that is silence. And to understand where the dark hair actually comes from, you have to listen to what the mothers were carrying at the same time. If your ancestors came from Ireland, something in your maternal line is older than you think. Not hundreds of years old, not 1,000. The most common maternal lineage in Irish women today traces directly back to the Bronze Age farmers who built those stone circles. But some Irish women carry something even older, a lineage called U5, the oldest maternal line in Europe. It connects modern Irish women directly to the first humans who set foot on that island after the last ice age retreated, women who hunted and fished along the Irish Atlantic coast more than 7,000 years ago. Their DNA is still in Ireland today, still measurable, still being passed from mother to daughter, maybe to you. And here is what makes this matter for your family specifically. Many of these ancient maternal lineages show their closest modern matches not to Britain, not to Scandinavia, but to France, Iberia, and the wider Atlantic coast. Ancient seafaring connections, routes that carried whole communities up the European coastline into Ireland long before any Viking ship existed. Some of those Atlantic lineages carried specific pigmentation alleles that kept dark hair alive, even as lighter traits spread everywhere else. Ireland's fathers brought transformation. Ireland's mothers preserved what came before. Together, your ancestors built the genetic range that makes the Black Irish face possible. But the biggest confirmation of all came in 2017, and it changed how scientists understand the entire Irish gene pool. In 2017, the Irish DNA Atlas Project, led by researchers from the Royal College of Surgeons and Trinity College Dublin, mapped the Irish gene pool with more precision than any previous study. They analyzed people whose grandparents were all from the same Irish regions. What they found dismantled the idea of a single Irish people entirely. Ireland is not one genetic population, it is 10 distinct genetic clusters, each shaped by geography and centuries of regional isolation, and the most ancient, most genetically distinctive clusters of all were concentrated in the West. Counties like Kerry and Cork showed stronger genetic continuity with Bronze Age Ireland than anywhere else on the island. The same lineages are visible in those Rathlin Island bones, still present, still measurable, 4,000 years later. While most of Ireland carries a detectable Scandinavian ancestry component from centuries of Viking influence, the Western clusters carry significantly less. Later arrivals barely touch them. The West was not overwritten. The West was never overwritten. And if your family came from those Western counties, or from the places in America where those families eventually ended up, what comes next is about you specifically. Isolation does something specific to a gene pool. Scientists call it the founder effect. When a small population is cut off from outside genetic influence across enough generations, rare traits do not just survive. They concentrate. They become the norm. The unusual combination that produces jet black hair alongside pale skin and light eyes had exactly the environment it needed in the west of Ireland. Remote Atlantic valleys, cliff-edge fishing villages, communities that married locally for century after century. If your family came from Kerry, Cork, or Galway, this is the environment that shaped what you carry today. Culture reinforced what geography protected. The West was the stronghold of the Irish language, of Gaelic tradition, of people who stayed. When you see the Black Irish face in the west of Ireland, you are not looking at an anomaly. You are looking at the oldest continuously preserved genetic legacy on the island. Now here is where it gets personal. The gene that makes all of this visible in a face, it is called MC1R, the primary switch controlling hair and skin pigmentation in humans. Ireland has the most unusual relationship with MC1R of any population on Earth. Variants of this gene are responsible for red hair. Ireland carries the highest concentration of these variants anywhere in the world. That is why roughly 10% of the Irish population has naturally red hair, when the global average sits below 2%. But here is where the standard story breaks down completely. Carrying an MC1R variant does not guarantee red hair. Pigmentation is not a single switch. It is a tug-of-war between competing genetic systems. Melanin production genes push toward dark hair, and MC1R mutations weaken that signal. Whoever wins determines what color actually grows. Someone can carry a red hair variant and still grow jet black hair if the melanin system is strong enough to override it. This is happening in Irish families everywhere. A sibling with hair the color of flames sitting next to a sibling with hair the color of midnight. Same parents, same gene pool, different winner in the same contest. If you have ever seen that in your own family and never understood how, you were watching 4,000 years of genetic history playing out at the kitchen table. The genetic variants driving that outcome are not recent arrivals. Ancient DNA confirms they were present in Ireland during the Neolithic period. Carried by Mediterranean farmers thousands of years before the Bronze Age, brought lighter traits to the island. The two systems have been competing ever since, and they never fully resolved. The Black Irish face is not a foreign import. It is what happens when ancient genetics refuses to lose, and it was about to survive something that would have ended most populations entirely. If you carry an Irish surname, you are carrying more than a name. Irish surnames are biological records. The O'Neill dynasty held political dominance across large parts of northwestern Ireland for centuries, claiming descent from the legendary High King Niall of the Nine Hostages. Genetic studies suggest a significant proportion of men in Northwest Ireland still share the same Y chromosome lineage. A branch of the R1BL21 haplogroup traces directly back to that ruling bloodline. One dynasty, one genetic signal, still visible across an entire region 1,000 years later. Your surname may be telling the same kind of story without you knowing it. Dynasties wrote part of the story. Tragedy wrote the other part. The Great Famine of 1845 to 1852 collapsed Ireland's population from roughly 8 million to 4 million in less than a decade. If your Irish family arrived in America in the 1840s or the 1850s, the famine is almost certainly the reason they left. Death and immigration emptied entire villages in the West. When half a population disappears, the DNA of those who remain gets amplified. Rare traits that might have stayed rare become defining features of the surviving community. In Western Ireland, the famine acted as a final genetic filter. What came through it was not just a people, it was the oldest genetic profile on the island, concentrated, unbroken, and carrying everything it had preserved for 4,000 years. And the people who survived did not stay. They crossed an ocean, and they brought everything with them. Between roughly 1717 and the mid-1800s, hundreds of thousands of Scots-Irish settlers moved into the American backcountry through the ports of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and the Carolinas, and they kept moving into the mountains, into Appalachia. They came from the same western counties of Ireland and lowland Scotland we have been talking about this entire time. Ulster, Connaught, the Atlantic coast. When they settled into the mountain hollows of Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, and western North Carolina, they did what their ancestors had done on the Irish coast. They isolated. They married within tight community networks. They stayed. The founder effect happened again. A different continent, 3,000 miles from the Atlantic. The same genetic logic. Today, Americans from deep Appalachian families who take DNA tests often show genetic profiles that closely match those ancient Western Irish and Scottish clusters from the Irish DNA Atlas, not because of a romantic story about who sailed where, because the same isolation that preserved the Black Irish face in Kerry and Cork preserved the same pattern in the hollows of eastern Kentucky. Appalachia is a genetic time capsule. The dark hair, pale skin, and light eyes in old Appalachian family photographs are not a mystery. They are the same genetic conversation that started 4,500 years ago on a small island at the edge of the Atlantic, still visible, still measurable, in families that never knew what they were carrying, maybe including yours. If this kind of history matters to you, the real story underneath the one you were told, subscribe and drop a comment below. Tell us where your family came from. We can only keep making this with your support. The myths were always more comfortable than the truth. Spanish sailors made for a better story than 4,000 years of unbroken genetic continuity. Vikings made for a more dramatic explanation than the quiet persistence of ancient pigmentation alleles in communities that simply never got diluted enough to lose them. The romantic stories survived because nobody had read the bones carefully enough to replace them. The DNA has now been read, and what it says is not complicated. The Black Irish were never foreign, never mysterious, never the product of some outside force passing through. They are the original face of the island, preserved in the West by geography and culture and the particular ruthlessness of survival, and carried, without knowing it, by millions of Americans whose ancestors brought something ancient across the Atlantic and kept it alive. That face in your family photo was never an accident, never an anomaly, never something that needed a shipwreck to explain it. It is the oldest face in Ireland, still here. It just took science long enough to confirm what the west of Ireland never actually forgot.